You know, sometimes life feels too ordinary to ever imagine disaster could be hiding beneath it. That was me. I used to wake up every morning beside the man I thought I'd grow old with, Daniel. He'd kiss my forehead before leaving for work, and I'd smile like it was proof that love still existed in this messy world. We'd been married for 11 years. Not perfect. Not cinematic, just comfortable. I thought comfort was enough. I thought stability meant love. Our house was small but warm, with sunlight sneaking through the curtains every morning, and laughter that echoed on good days. But if I'm being honest, that laughter had started to fade long before I realized it was gone. I should have noticed the signs. The late-night office meetings, the new cologne, the way he started sleeping facing the wall instead of me. But when you love someone, you build excuses for them like walls around your heart. You tell yourself, he's tired, he's stressed, it's just a phase. And you ignore that ache, that whisper inside you saying something isn't right. He wasn't cruel. He didn't shout, didn't fight, didn't blame. He just stopped seeing me. And honestly, that hurts more than hate ever could. I remember one night I tried to surprise him with dinner, his favorite, creamy mushroom pasta, garlic bread, and that red wine we used to share on anniversaries. He came home 2 hours late. No apology, just a quick, "I already ate." I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting, but as I packed that cold pasta away, I felt something inside me begin to crumble. It's strange, isn't it? How you can live beside someone every single day and still feel completely alone. He used to tell me everything. His fears, his dreams, even those silly little jokes he'd make just to hear me laugh. But lately, his words had become functional. "Did you pay the bill? Where's my tie? Don't wait up. I missed us." The late-night talks, the way he'd reach for my hand under the table, the way he used to look at me like I was his whole world. Now I felt like an afterthought, like background noise in his new life I wasn't invited to. One evening, I asked him something simple. "Do you still love me?" He looked up from his phone and said, "Of course, why would you even ask that?" Then went right back to scrolling. That was the moment I knew something had already left us. But love makes you desperate. It makes you fight for ghosts, for memories, for something that maybe never even existed the way you thought it did. So I stayed. I told myself it was just a rough patch. Every marriage has them, right? That's what people say. But no one tells you how lonely those rough patches can be when you're the only one trying to patch things up. He started dressing differently too, button-down shirts instead of his usual polos. He began working out again, suddenly conscious of how he looked. At first, I was proud. I thought maybe he was taking better care of himself. But then, he started spending more time on his phone. He'd smile at messages I never got to see. Sometimes he'd go to the balcony late at night, whispering into his phone. I asked him once, "Who are you talking to?" He said, "Just a colleague." About work stuff. And I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to believe him. Because believing otherwise meant admitting my world was about to collapse. And I wasn't ready for that. People think betrayal starts the day you find out. It doesn't. It starts the day your gut starts screaming, and you choose silence instead. I'd sit in our bedroom, pretending to read, but really just staring at him. Watching the distance between us grow wider. Watching him smile at his phone. A smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. One night, I reached out, trying to hold his hand. He flinched. Just slightly, but enough. That's when I realized I'd become a stranger in my own marriage. He used to come home smelling like coffee and aftershave. Now he came home smelling like something floral, something that wasn't mine. Perfume, sweet, unfamiliar, and suffocating. I asked him about it once. He laughed and said, "You're imagining things." Maybe I was. But I could feel the truth slipping between us, heavy and unspoken. There's a special kind of pain that comes from being gaslighted by the person you love. It makes you doubt your sanity, your memory, even your own heart. You start wondering, am I being too sensitive? Am I crazy? And that's exactly how I felt. lost inside my own home. One weekend, I suggested we go away. Just the two of us. He said he was too busy. So I went alone. I sat by the sea, watching waves crash against the rocks, and for the first time, I admitted to myself, I was in a marriage that was slowly dying. Still, I clung to hope, because letting go meant failure. And I'd spent too many years building this life to watch it fall apart. I came home that night and found him asleep on the couch, phone in hand. A message lit up the screen, just a name. A woman's name. And in that instant, my stomach dropped. I didn't open it, not yet. But something inside me whispered, this is it, the calm before the storm. Because deep down, I knew my life was about to change forever. And I wasn't ready for the truth that was already standing in front of me, wearing my husband's face. It's strange how betrayal never happens all at once. It arrives in pieces, like 1,000 little paper cuts that don't kill you, but bleed you slowly. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already covered in invisible wounds. After that night, the one when I saw her name flash across his phone, something inside me changed. I couldn't sleep. Every time his phone buzzed, my heart skipped. Every time he smiled at a message, I felt a pang I couldn't name. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. After all, trust is the foundation of marriage, right? But what do you do when the foundation starts to crack beneath your feet? He became careful after that. Too careful. The password on his phone changed. He started taking calls in the car instead of at home, and whenever I asked questions, he had a dozen easy answers. Smooth, calm, practiced. Almost too practiced. I started feeling like an intruder in my own house. Every time I walked into a room, he'd close his laptop or flip his phone face down. Every innocent movement started to feel like a secret. Every silence, like a lie. But what haunted me most wasn't the possibility that he was cheating. It was the feeling that I didn't even know him anymore. His eyes, the same eyes that once looked at me like I was his forever, now looked through me, as if I were invisible. I tried to bridge the gap. Made him breakfast before work, left small notes in his lunchbox, wore that perfume he once said he loved. But none of it mattered. He barely noticed. He barely noticed me. There were moments I'd catch myself staring at him, studying him like a stranger. His expressions, his tone, the way he spoke to me now. So detached, so distant. And I'd ask myself, where did we go wrong? When did love become this quiet? I even started blaming myself. Maybe I'd gained a little weight. Maybe I wasn't as exciting as before. Maybe after 11 years, I'd just become predictable. That's what women do. We internalize, we shrink, we carry the blame for the pain someone else caused. But the truth, no amount of lipstick or dinner plans can fix a man who's already left you in his heart. I remember one Sunday morning. He was sitting on the porch, phone in hand, smiling. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen in months. And I stood there, frozen in the doorway, realizing that smile wasn't for me anymore. It was for her. I didn't know her name yet, but I could feel her shadow between us. Later that day, he said he had to run errands. He left in a hurry, wearing that new shirt I'd never seen before. I waited for him to come home, staring at the clock, watching hours pass like years. He returned just before midnight, smelling of perfume again. That same sweet floral scent that didn't belong to me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to throw that shirt in his face and shout, "Who is she?" But I didn't, because I wasn't ready to hear the truth out loud. And maybe, just maybe, a small part of me still hoped I was wrong. So I smiled, pretended everything was fine, because pretending was easier than breaking. That night, I lay beside him, listening to his breathing, steady, calm, peaceful. And I wondered how he could sleep so easily while I was drowning in silence. The next morning, I noticed something new. A message popped up on his smartwatch as he was in the shower. Just one line. "Last night was perfect. I miss you already." My world stopped. My hands shook as I stared at those words. Glowing, cruel, undeniable. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to throw the watch across the room. But instead, I placed it back exactly where it was. Because I needed to be sure. I needed to catch the truth myself. No more excuses, no more lies. So I waited. I watched. I became quiet, observant, deliberate. He thought I didn't notice when he left earlier than usual. He thought I believed his late meetings and client dinners. But I was collecting moments, small damning details, like the lipstick stain I found on his coffee mug one morning. A soft coral shade, not mine, or the hotel receipt tucked into his jacket pocket. 2 guests, 1 room, Friday night. Every clue was a dagger. But I stayed silent, because sometimes silence is power. And I wanted him to hang himself with his own lies. Days passed like fog. We still lived together. But our house felt colder, haunted by everything we weren't saying. We'd sit at the dinner table, pretending to be a couple, but even the clinking of forks felt forced. He barely looked at me anymore. And when he did, there was guilt in his eyes. Quick, hidden, but I saw it. One night I decided to test him. I said softly, "You've been distant lately. Is something wrong?" He sighed, rubbed his temples and said, "You're overthinking again. Can we not do this right now?" Again. That word hit me hard. Again. As if I was the problem. As if my pain was just an inconvenience. That's when it hit me. He wasn't even afraid of losing me. Because he thought I'd never leave. And that realization broke me in a way nothing else ever had. From that night on, I started preparing myself, not to fix things, but to face them. I stopped begging for affection. Stopped cooking dinners he never came home to eat. Stopped trying to be the woman he once loved. Instead, I started becoming the woman I'd need to be to survive without him. And maybe that's when he started to notice me again. Not out of love, but confusion. Because nothing terrifies a guilty man more than a woman who goes silent. He'd ask, "You okay?" And I'd smile. Never better. He didn't know that smile was the sound of my heart learning to armor itself. And somewhere deep inside, I already knew the storm was coming. And this time I wouldn't hide from it. Because sometimes, losing the person you love is the only way to find yourself again. There's a moment in every woman's life when she realizes the truth she's been running from has finally caught her. No more pretending. No more excuses. Just the cold, heavy silence of knowing. For me, that moment came on a Thursday night. A night like any other. Ordinary, unremarkable. Except nothing was ordinary anymore. Daniel said he had a client dinner. I didn't argue. I didn't question. I just nodded, smiled, and said, "Drive safe." But inside, I was already done pretending. Because for weeks every instinct in me had been screaming. And I'd learned, a woman's intuition isn't just emotion. It's evidence we haven't found yet. So that night, I followed him. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to stop living half a life built on lies. I waited 15 minutes after he left, then grabbed my keys. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely start the car. The entire drive, my heart pounded like a drum, part fear, part adrenaline, part heartbreak already forming in advance. He said he was meeting a client at a restaurant across town. But when I got there, his car wasn't in the lot. I parked a block away and waited, trying to breathe. Half an hour later, I saw him. Not in a suit like he'd said, but in casual clothes, and he wasn't alone. She was younger. Pretty, effortless, the kind of beauty that doesn't know what pain costs yet. They walked side by side, close enough that their arms brushed. And then he reached for her hand, just like that. So casually. Like it was normal. Like the vows he made to me never existed. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Everything, the streetlights, the sounds, the people around us, went blurry. It was like watching someone else's nightmare. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there in my car, frozen, staring at the two of them laughing. The man who once called me his forever was now holding another woman like she was his entire world. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I couldn't tell. When they finally walked into a small Italian restaurant, I followed from a distance. Through the window, I could see them, smiling, toasting, sharing a plate of pasta. My pasta. The same one I'd made him that night he said he'd already eaten. That's when the first tear fell. Then another. until my vision blurred and I couldn't hold the steering wheel steady. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was humiliation, because I'd been begging for scraps of love from a man who was already feeding someone else with it. I drove home on autopilot. I don't remember the traffic lights, the turns, or even parking the car. I just remember standing in our living room, staring at the framed wedding photo on the wall. The smiles, the promises, the ring on his finger. All lies now. I wanted to smash it, to throw it across the room. But instead, I just whispered. Why? When he came home later that night, I was sitting on the couch. The house was dark. I didn't even turn on the lights. He froze when he saw me. His voice trembled just a little as he said, "You're still up." And I said quietly, "How was dinner?" He hesitated. "It was fine. Long day. I'm exhausted." Then he tried to walk past me. That's when I said her name, the name from his phone. The name I'd read on that glowing message weeks ago. He stopped, the color drained from his face. And in that silence, that heavy, suffocating silence, I had my answer. He didn't even deny it. Not at first. He just sighed and sat down, like a man caught between guilt and relief. Finally, he said it. "It just happened. I didn't plan for it." I laughed. A hollow, broken sound I didn't recognize as my own. "Didn't plan for it," I repeated. "You don't accidentally end up in someone else's arms, Daniel. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." He looked away, jaw tight. "She makes me feel alive again," he said softly. And that was the moment my heart finally shattered. Alive again, as if I'd been the one who killed his joy. As if years of love, loyalty, and sacrifice meant nothing compared to a few months of excitement. I asked him one last question. Was it worth it? He didn't answer. He just stood up, grabbed his coat, and said, "I think I should stay somewhere else tonight." And just like that, he walked out of our home, out of our marriage, out of the life we'd built together. I didn't chase him, didn't scream, didn't beg. I just sat there, listening to the sound of the door closing behind him, a sound that echoed like the end of everything I'd ever known. That night, I cried until there was nothing left. No more tears, no more words, just emptiness. When morning came, the sunlight hit our bed, half empty, half cold. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just mourning my husband. I was mourning the woman I used to be before he broke her. When he left that night, the silence that followed felt heavier than any goodbye. It wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that hums inside your bones, that makes you aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every empty space that used to be filled by someone else's presence. For days I moved through the house like a ghost. His coffee mug still sat in the sink, lipstick stain and all. His shoes still waited by the door. His cologne still lingered on the pillow, cruel reminders that love can vanish faster than its scent does. People talk about heartbreak like it's a single moment, but it isn't. It's 1,000 tiny deaths you live through every day. The sound of the kettle boiling when no one's there to ask if you want tea, the echo of footsteps that belong to nobody anymore. I tried to keep myself busy: laundry, dishes, work, anything to drown the ache. But grief has a way of sneaking in between the chores. One moment I'd be folding towels, and the next I'd be on the floor, clutching a shirt that still smelled like him, whispering, "Why wasn't I enough?" My friends tried to help. They came over with wine and sympathy and soft voices that said things like, "You'll get through this," and "He doesn't deserve you." But they didn't see the nights, the real ones, when I sat awake until 3 a.m., replaying every fight, every silence, every choice that led us here. Sleep became a stranger, food lost its taste, even music hurt because every song reminded me of a life that was now over. I started avoiding mirrors, not because I hated how I looked, but because I couldn't stand the woman staring back, hollow-eyed, broken, a stranger wearing my face. And then came the humiliation. Whispers. Pitying looks from neighbors who'd heard things. People love a tragedy they can discuss over coffee, don't they? Everyone suddenly had an opinion about my marriage, about how men will be men, And maybe you should have tried harder. As if my loyalty had been the problem. As if my kindness was the reason he left. There were mornings I couldn't get out of bed. I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder how long a human heart could ache before it stopped beating altogether. But somehow, I always got up, maybe out of habit. Maybe because somewhere inside, the smallest piece of me still believed in survival. Weeks passed. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't ask how I was. It was as if 11 years had been erased, like I was a chapter he'd finished reading. But I couldn't erase him that easily. Everywhere I looked, he was there. In the books he'd read, in the dent his body left on the mattress, in the smell of rain that reminded me of the day we first met. I tried writing him a letter once. Not to send, just to pour out everything I wanted to say. It started with anger, then slipped into sorrow, then turned into something I hadn't expected, forgiveness, not for him, but for me. Because I realized I'd spent too long carrying the weight of someone else's choices. One afternoon, I found myself in our garden. Weeds everywhere, flowers dried out. It mirrored how I felt inside, so I picked up the shovel and started cleaning it, one weed at a time, one broken thing at a time, and maybe that was the first step toward healing, tending to something that could still grow. People assume empowerment comes with grand gestures, new jobs, new cities, new lovers. But sometimes it's simpler. It's getting out of bed. It's brushing your hair. It's choosing to eat when you don't want to. It's deciding to live when every part of you wants to disappear. Slowly, the fog began to lift. The house didn't feel like a tomb anymore. It started feeling like mine. I changed the curtains, painted the walls, moved the bed to the other side of the room, away from the window where I'd once watched for his car headlights. And with every change, I took back a piece of myself. Of course, the pain didn't vanish overnight. Some days I still checked my phone, half expecting a message that never came. Some nights I still woke up reaching for him before remembering he wasn't there. But the difference was, those moments no longer defined me. They were memories, not prisons. Then, one morning, I caught my reflection and didn't look away. I saw a woman with scars. Yes, but also with strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She wasn't the same woman who begged him to stay. She was someone who had learned that love doesn't mean losing yourself. I started going on walks again. Bought myself flowers without waiting for anyone else to. Signed up for a class I'd always wanted to take. Bit by bit, I was rebuilding. And in that quiet process, I realized something powerful. He hadn't taken everything from me. He'd just taken his version of love. But mine, my capacity to love deeply honestly, that was still mine. There were still lonely nights, yes. There were still tears when certain songs played. But there was also laughter. Genuine, unexpected, healing laughter. That came from remembering who I was before all of this. People say time heals all wounds. I don't think that's true. Time just teaches you how to live with the scars. By the end of that first year, I stopped counting days since he left. I stopped wondering what he was doing, who he was with, whether he missed me. Because finally, I didn't care. I'd survived the storm. And though the damage was real, so was the strength that rose from it. Sometimes I'd stand by the window, coffee in hand, sunlight on my face, and whisper to myself, "You made it." And that whisper felt louder than any apology he could ever give. The thing about healing is that no one tells you how messy it really is. From the outside, it looks like strength. On the inside, it feels like drowning in slow motion. After the first wave of calm that came with accepting he was gone, the next wave hit harder. It came without warning, in the middle of grocery aisles, in elevators, in the quiet moments between doing absolutely nothing. Grief doesn't knock. It just walks in, sits on your chest, and dares you to breathe. I thought I'd already cried enough tears to empty myself, but pain has layers. It hides underneath ordinary things. A song on the radio, a stranger's perfume, a couple holding hands on the street. Each one peeled open another piece of me I thought had already healed. I remember one morning waking up and feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, no hope. Just a numbness that scared me more than the tears ever had. Because at least when you're crying, you feel something. When you're numb, you start wondering if you'll ever feel anything again. I stopped answering calls, stopped meeting friends. My world shrank to four walls and the echo of my own thoughts. Some days I didn't shower. Some nights I slept in my clothes, afraid that if I took too long to rest, the memories would find me again. People said, "You have to move on. Move on." As if heartbreak were a piece of furniture you could drag out to the curb and forget about. They didn't understand that my entire identity had been built around loving him. When he left, it wasn't just a relationship ending. It was like losing the language I'd used to explain myself to the world. I tried therapy, I tried journaling, but some days, all I could manage was breathing in and breathing out, and honestly, that had to be enough. Then came the anger, not just at him but at myself, for staying so long, for loving so blindly, for ignoring every red flag because I was so desperate to keep us alive. I wanted to scream, to smash plates, to burn every photo of us smiling at a happiness that never really existed. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a single cup of coffee, and whispered, "Never again. Never again," became a kind of prayer. I whispered it each time my mind tried to replay the good moments, each time nostalgia lied to me and tried to paint him kind again. At first, anger felt foreign. I had spent years learning how to forgive, how to be patient, how to understand. But no one ever taught me how to be angry in a way that didn't destroy me. So I let it out in pieces, through tears that turned to shaking laughter, through long drives with the windows down and the radio too loud. I started talking to myself in the car, saying the words I never said to him. "How dare you make me question my worth? How dare you break a home we built with both our hands?" It sounded crazy, but it was freeing, because sometimes healing isn't graceful. Sometimes it's loud, raw, and messy, like pulling glass out of your own skin. I began noticing the small things I'd stopped doing for years. Cooking for myself, singing in the shower, leaving the window open at night just to feel the breeze. Little freedoms I'd traded away without even realizing it. And then one night, I caught myself laughing, really laughing, at a silly movie I'd put on just for background noise. For a second I froze, because it felt like betrayal, like I wasn't supposed to feel happy yet. But then I realized joy isn't betrayal, it's survival. Still, the breakdown came in waves. Some mornings I'd wake up strong. Other days I'd find myself scrolling through old messages, reading his "I love yous," and wondering when exactly they stopped being true. Healing isn't linear, it's a loop, and I was learning to live inside that loop without drowning. One afternoon, I went through the box of our old photos, weddings, birthdays, vacations, moments frozen in time where we looked perfect. But looking closer, I could see it now. The distance behind his eyes, the exhaustion behind my smile. Those pictures were evidence of how hard I'd tried to keep us together. I didn't throw them away. Not yet. Instead, I put them in a drawer and said, "Someday this won't hurt to look at," because pretending the past never happened wouldn't make it go away. I had to learn to live with it, not as a wound, but as a reminder. One evening, while cleaning, I found his sweater at the back of the closet. I held it for a long time, waiting for the ache to hit, but nothing came. Just a quiet sense of release. So I folded it, placed it in a donation bag, and whispered, "Someone else can have what you left behind." It wasn't closure, not yet. But it was something like peace. I began to realize that breakdowns aren't the end of you. They're the moment when the old version of you finally collapses to make space for who you're meant to become. There were still nights when the silence pressed against me so hard I could barely breathe. I missed having someone's breathing next to me, even if that someone had already left me long before he walked out the door. Loneliness has a cruel way of sounding like comfort. It tricks you into reaching for the very thing that broke you. But instead of calling him, I wrote, page after page. Sometimes I didn't even make sense. It was just rage and grief and tiny bursts of hope poured out in ink. And slowly, the paper started to hold the weight I'd been carrying alone. One night, I wrote a letter I never planned to send. I wrote, "You didn't destroy me. You revealed me. You showed me the parts of myself that still believed love meant suffering. You taught me that I can survive being unloved. And that's the strongest thing I'll ever know." When I finished, I cried again. But this time, the tears felt different. Lighter, like letting go instead of breaking apart. A few days later, I met my reflection in the mirror and, for the first time in months, I didn't look away. My eyes were swollen, my skin pale, but there was something else there. Something fierce, quietly alive. That woman staring back at me wasn't the same one he left behind. She'd walked through hell and was still standing. And standing, I realized, was enough. I started rebuilding in small, almost invisible ways. A morning walk, a home-cooked meal, a call to a friend I'd lost touch with. Each act was a declaration I'm still here. I began to understand that forgiveness wasn't for him, it was for me. Not to excuse what he did, but to stop carrying the poison he left behind. Hate is heavy, it anchors you to the very thing you want to escape. So I forgave him quietly, privately, not out of mercy, but out of rebellion. Because freedom, I learned, is choosing peace even when chaos would be easier. And somewhere in that slow, aging process, the breakdown became a breakthrough. I stopped waiting for an apology. I stopped imagining what I'd say if he ever came back. Instead, I focused on becoming someone I'd never leave again. One night, I stood at my window, the same one I'd cried beside countless times, and whispered to the dark, "I'm still here." Not as a wife, not as a victim, but as myself. And though I didn't know it then, that whisper was the beginning of something powerful, the start of the woman I was becoming. The woman he would one day try to come back to. The woman who would never need him again. There's a strange quiet that comes after months of crying. It isn't peace, not yet. It's exhaustion. Like your soul has been wrung out, every last tear, every last scream emptied into the walls that have witnessed it all. But in that quiet something new begins to grow. It's small at first. A thought. A whisper. A single, fragile question. What if I'm more than what happened to me? I didn't wake up one morning suddenly healed. No, it was slower than that. Like sunlight sneaking in through a half-open curtain after a long night. I started noticing the things around me again. The smell of coffee, the sound of rain. The way the world keeps moving no matter how much your life has stopped. For the first time in months I took a walk without checking my phone. I watched children chase each other in the park, their laughter spilling into the air like something sacred. I smiled. A real one. And it startled me. Because I had forgotten what it felt like for joy to exist without permission. I went home and opened my windows. Let the light in. The air smelled like freedom, sharp, clean, alive. And that's when it hit me. I had survived the worst thing I thought could ever happen to me. If I could survive that, then maybe I could survive anything. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a series of tiny rebellions. Cooking my favorite meal just for me. Buying flowers without waiting for someone else to bring them. Sleeping in the middle of the bed because now it was mine. Each small act was a declaration that I still mattered. That I could love myself in all the ways he never did. It wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to go back, not to him, but to the illusion of comfort. But I reminded myself comfort isn't the same as happiness. Sometimes the things that make us feel safe are the very things that keep us small. So I kept walking, through fear, through doubt, through the hollow spaces that used to be filled with him. And step by step I began to feel something that scared me even more than heartbreak ever had. I began to feel hope. It started showing up in the mirror. The woman staring back at me had fire in her eyes again. Not rage, fire. The kind that lights up the dark, not the kind that burns everything down. One morning I put on a dress I hadn't worn in years. It wasn't for anyone, it was for me. I looked at my reflection and whispered, "You're still beautiful. You always were." It felt strange saying it out loud, but something inside me softened, like my heart had been waiting to hear those words from me all along. That was the first day I didn't think about him once. Not his voice, not his face, not the way he left, just me. And in that silence I realized the truth. Losing him didn't destroy me, it revealed me. The days began to blend into a rhythm that was mine alone. For so long, my life had revolved around us. What he wanted, what he needed, what made him happy. Now it revolved around me. And at first that felt selfish. Because for years I had been taught that love meant giving, forgiving, accommodating. But no one ever told me that love, real love, also means choosing yourself. So I started practicing that, choosing myself in small ways at first. Ordering what I liked at restaurants, saying no, without guilt, resting without feeling lazy. And slowly, those small choices built a kind of power I'd never felt before. I began writing again, not about pain, but about life. About sunlight and laughter and quiet resilience. It wasn't perfect prose, but it was honest. Every word I wrote felt like stitching together the torn pieces of who I used to be. There's something sacred about rediscovering your own company. The silence that once felt like a punishment now became a sanctuary. I'd sit by the window with tea and think, I'm safe here. I'm enough here. One afternoon, I visited the lake where we used to go together. It had been years since I'd been there, but everything looked the same. The same willow trees bending over the water, the same ripples chasing the wind. Only this time, I didn't feel the ache of loss. I felt presence. The kind that comes when you realize you no longer belong to your pain. I threw a small pebble into the water and whispered, goodbye. Not to him, but to the woman who once believed she wasn't enough. And as the ripples spread, I imagined each one carrying away the fragments of my old self, the girl who loved too hard, apologized too often, and stayed too long. People started noticing the change. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months told me, you look lighter. And I'd smile because they were right. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I found joy in simple things. A song that made me dance in the kitchen, A sunrise that painted the world gold. I realized happiness wasn't something someone else could give or take away. It was something I could build, piece by piece, from within. For the first time I felt grateful, not for what happened, but for what it taught me. Pain had been my greatest teacher. It stripped me down to nothing and forced me to rebuild from truth, not illusion. And what I found beneath all that wreckage was strength. Real strength isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the way you get up when no one's watching. It's the way you forgive without forgetting. It's the way you learn to love again, not others, but yourself. I stopped asking why he did it, because that question kept me tied to him, and I was done living chained to someone else's choices. Instead, I asked, what do I want now? Who do I want to be? And that question became my compass. I started traveling again, short trips, solo adventures that scared and excited me all at once. There's something about sitting alone in a cafe in a new city, realizing you can exist beautifully without being anyone's anything. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like peace. One evening, as the sky turned crimson and the first stars appeared, I felt something shift inside me, a deep, steady knowing I wasn't broken anymore. I was becoming. It's strange how quietly healing arrives, not like thunder, not like applause, just a soft hum in your chest that says, you made it. One morning, I woke up before sunrise. The world outside was still, that perfect silence that happens before the light breaks. I made coffee, wrapped myself in a blanket, and stood by the window, and there it was, peace. Not borrowed, not begged for, mine. It wasn't that life was suddenly perfect. The scars were still there. The memories still flickered sometimes in the corners of my mind. But they didn't hurt anymore. They were just part of the story. I used to think healing meant erasing everything that happened. But now I know it means accepting it, all of it, and choosing to keep moving anyway. That morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote myself a promise. I wrote, from this day on, I will not beg for love. I will not shrink to be understood. I will not chase what walks away. I will not apologize for needing peace. And I signed it with my name, my full name, as if reclaiming every piece of myself that had been lost in his shadow. A week later I went back to work. People smiled when they saw me. One colleague said, "You're glowing." And I realized she wasn't wrong. It wasn't the glow of makeup or happiness. It was the glow of a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of light. I started saying yes to life again, yes to new projects, yes to friends, yes to the simple joys of being alive, and slowly, that yes turned into something bigger, a hunger for more. One afternoon I stood in front of a mirror, really looking at myself, the same face, the same eyes, but the woman looking back wasn't the one he left. She was softer, wiser, stronger. She carried her scars like medals, not shame, and in that moment, I whispered, "You did it. You saved yourself." Because that's what awakening really is. Realizing no one's coming to rescue you, and that's okay, because you already have everything you need to rescue yourself. Later that day, I passed by a couple holding hands in the street. Once upon a time, that sight would have made my chest ache, but now, I just smiled. Love no longer felt like a wound, it felt like a choice. And I knew when it came for me again someday, I'd recognize it not by how much it hurt, but by how peaceful it felt. That night, I lit a candle for the woman I used to be, the one who begged to be loved, the one who thought being left meant being unworthy. I whispered, "Thank you for surviving long enough for me to be born." Then I blew out the candle, and with it, the last flicker of pain. I didn't know what the future held, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Because now I understood something powerful. Sometimes the universe breaks you not to destroy you, but to wake you up. And I was wide awake. They say revenge is living well. I never believed that, until I started doing it without even trying. After the storm, my life became something quieter, simpler, but also more radiant than it had ever been before. I didn't plan to glow up, I became one. Not out of vanity, but out of gratitude, for the body that carried me through grief, for the heart that kept beating even when it was broken. It started small. I cut my hair. It sounds silly, but it felt symbolic, like shedding the last threads of who I was when I belonged to him. Each snip was a declaration. This is my new beginning. When I looked in the mirror afterward, I almost didn't recognize myself, not because I looked different, but because I looked alive. I started taking care of myself again, not in the desperate, performative way I used to, doing things to be seen, to be loved, to be enough. This time I did it just for me. Morning walks, long baths, books that made me think and cry and dream. I fed my body with kindness and my mind with peace. I got back into work, really into it. What used to be a distraction now became a passion. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Each project, each challenge, reminded me that I was capable of so much more than surviving heartbreak. I was smart, I was creative, and I was finally free to use those parts of me without someone else dimming them. With time, The changes started showing, not just on the outside, but in the way I moved, the way I spoke. Confidence isn't loud, it's quiet. It's walking into a room without needing to be chosen. It's knowing you belong because you said so. I bought new clothes, not fancy, just me. Soft fabrics. Colors I'd always loved but never worn because he once said they didn't suit me. I wore them anyway. And each time I caught my reflection, I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I saw a woman who wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. My home changed too. I repainted the walls, warm shades, gold and beige, sunlight trapped in color. I replaced the photos, not with people but with memories of places I wanted to go, words that made me feel powerful. The house no longer echoed with loneliness. It hummed with energy, and then came the friends, the real ones. The ones who stayed when everything fell apart. We laughed over wine, danced in the living room, made new memories that didn't have his shadow in them. There was something healing about joy shared honestly. No pretending, no pain, just life. Sometimes, people talk about glow-ups like they're all makeup and money. But mine wasn't about looking better. It was about being free. Every part of me that had been silenced was speaking again, and she had a lot to say. Freedom has a sound. It's not the roar of rebellion. It's the soft, steady rhythm of your own footsteps when you finally walk in the direction of your choosing. That's what my life became movement. I signed up for a photography class just because I'd always wanted to. The first day I felt nervous, surrounded by people younger, bolder, more confident. But the moment I lifted that camera and saw the world framed through my own eyes again, something clicked inside me. It wasn't just about taking pictures. It was about learning to see again. Everything looked different now. Even the pain. Even the memories. They weren't chains anymore. They were chapters. I started traveling, nothing extravagant. Short solo trips to nearby towns, beaches, mountains. Each journey reminded me how big the world really was, and how small my heartbreak had become in comparison. I'd sit at cafes with my notebook, writing stories about strangers, about love, about rebirth. Sometimes I'd catch people staring, maybe at the quiet confidence of a woman alone, maybe at the peace on her face. And I'd think, if they only knew what it took to look this calm. One evening, while watching the sunset from a hilltop, I caught myself whispering, "Thank you." Not to him, never to him. To life, to pain, to every shattered piece that forced me to rebuild stronger. Because now, when I looked at the woman I was becoming, I could see it. The transformation wasn't about erasing my scars. It was about wearing them with pride. I got a message from him once around that time. Just a simple, "Hey, how have you been?" I stared at it for a while. The old me would have answered, politely, nervously, still searching for closure. But the woman I had become smiled, locked her phone, and went back to sipping her coffee, because silence, I realized, is an answer too. It was strange, though. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't wish him pain or karma or regret. I simply didn't care. And that, more than anything, felt like freedom. The glow-up wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, undeniable. It was in the way I carried myself, spine straight, shoulders back, eyes forward. In the way I spoke, calm, grounded, sure. In the way I no longer needed to explain why I left or why I stayed away. People started noticing. "Something's different about you," they'd say, and I'd just smile. Because how do you explain that peace after chaos becomes its own kind of beauty? One evening I treated myself to dinner at a small rooftop restaurant. The city lights shimmered like scattered stars. I poured a glass of wine and toasted to myself, not for surviving, but for becoming. That night, as music floated through the air, I realized I wasn't lonely anymore. Being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing. Loneliness is waiting for someone to fill the space. Being alone is realizing you already fill it beautifully. And that truth, that radiant, liberating truth, became the center of my glow. The full power of transformation isn't just in what you do, it's in how you feel. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I started taking better care of my body. Not for anyone else, not to attract attention, but because I loved feeling strong. Yoga in the mornings, running along the riverside, nourishing meals that made me feel alive from the inside out. Every drop of sweat, every stretch, every deep breath was a reminder I am worth my own love. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who never judged, who never abandoned me when life got messy. We laughed until we cried, danced until our feet hurt, and shared stories that reminded me life can still be vibrant and joyous. I started going to events, meeting new people, experiencing the world without the shadow of him looming over every choice. And then, something remarkable happened. I looked in the mirror one day and saw a woman who had risen from heartbreak, not bruised but radiant. A woman whose past could no longer define her future. The scars were still there, yes, but they glimmered like silver lines in porcelain. Proof of survival, proof of resilience, proof of strength. I realized the ultimate glow-up isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It's the quiet confidence of a woman who knows her worth and refuses to let anyone take it away again. And just as I was settling into this power, life reminded me that the world had changed. I had changed. He came back. Not with apologies, not with explanations. He came back with the familiar charm, the easy smile, the same man who had walked away. At first, part of me felt the old ache, the hurt, the longing, the betrayal. But then I saw him through new eyes. The man I once loved no longer had the same power over me. I felt no longing, no desperation, only recognition he was a chapter that had ended, and I had moved on to the next one, brighter, stronger, and unstoppable. When he tried to pull me back, I didn't falter. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I simply smiled, steady and sure, and said, "I'm no longer yours. I'm mine now." And that, more than any action, more than any revenge, was the ultimate triumph. Because a glow-up isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you can rise from the ashes and shine brighter than ever before. I had survived betrayal. I had survived heartbreak. I had survived abandonment. And I had discovered that the greatest love of all is the one you give yourself. The woman I had once been, fragile, uncertain, scared, had transformed into someone unbreakable. And in that transformation, I had found peace, power, and freedom. Life continued. The city lights shimmered, the nights grew quiet, and the world moved forward, and I moved forward too. Not behind him, not because of him, but beyond him. I had discovered something sacred. True strength isn't measured by how much you can endure. It's measured by how brightly you can shine after everything tries to dim you. And shine I did. It had been months since he left. Months of rebuilding, months of finding myself, months of learning to stand so firmly on my own that no one could shake me. And yet, when the knock came at my door, my heart skipped. Not because I wanted to see him, not because I missed him, but because the sound, familiar, insistent, stirred memories I thought I had buried deep. I opened the door. There he stood. The man who had broken my world, the man who had walked away without a backward glance. He looked older, maybe humbled, maybe just tired. But it didn't matter. The person he had been, the person who could walk out of our life so easily, no longer had power over me. "Can we talk?" he said, his voice soft, almost pleading. I studied him. I saw the hesitation, the regret, the expectation that I would fall back into his arms. I didn't speak at first, because the truth was, words weren't enough to capture how far I had come. I had changed. The broken, pleading girl he left behind had been replaced by a woman who knew her worth, a woman who would never again surrender her peace for someone else's selfishness. "I'm not the same woman you left," I said finally, my voice steady. "Car." He blinked, like he hadn't expected that. He started, then stopped. "I made mistakes," he said. Mistakes. As if that word could sum up betrayal, abandonment, lies. I let him speak, because part of me wanted to see him try, to feel the weight of his own actions reflected in the way he looked at me now. But the other part of me, the stronger part, knew what I already knew. I didn't need answers. I didn't need closure. I had myself. He stepped closer, as if proximity could erase the past. "I've changed," he said. "I realized what I lost. I want us back." For a moment, part of me felt that old pull, the memories of laughter, late-night talks, the easy comfort of familiarity. But then I looked at him, really looked, and I saw the truth. The man standing in front of me hadn't changed. He had simply realized that someone else's absence hurt him more than leaving ever would. "I'm not the woman you left behind," I said. "I won't be your second chance, your backup plan, your safety net." He frowned, disbelief creeping into his features. I thought I could fix it," he stammered. "Fix it." The word felt absurd. I hadn't been broken. I had rebuilt. Stronger, wiser, freer. And no amount of pleading could take that away. "I'm done waiting for someone to decide I'm worth it," I continued, my voice growing firmer. "I'm done forgiving without boundaries. I'm done shrinking myself so someone else can feel bigger. I'm done being your choice when I've chosen me." His face fell. I could see the surprise, the desperation, maybe even fear. But I didn't waver. I didn't soften. Because I had learned that love without respect, without loyalty, without reciprocity is not love. It's a cage. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said finally. "But you won't find me there. I'm free now, truly free." And with that I stepped back, closing the door gently but firmly, not angrily, not vengefully, but decisively. In that silence I felt the full weight of my freedom settle into my chest. It was a quiet power, a deep, unwavering strength. No heartbreak, no betrayal, no regrets, nothing could touch the woman I had become. I closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. No tears, no shaking hands, no collapsing, just silence. A silence that didn't feel empty, it felt peaceful. Outside, his footsteps faded down the hallway, swallowed by distance and time. And as they disappeared, so did the last remnants of my old life. I walked to the window, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. The light touched everything, golden, warm, forgiving. It touched me too. For the first time in years, I felt light, not because someone loved me, but because I did. I made myself a cup of tea, turned on my favorite music, and let the melody fill the air. Every beat, every note, every lyric felt like a victory, not over him but over the version of myself that once believed I wasn't enough. Because I am enough, I always was. The next morning, I woke up early and opened my journal. On a clean page, I wrote day 1, not of starting over, but of continuing beautifully. That day, I packed a small bag, grabbed my camera, and headed for the coast. The sea had always been my place of truth, wild, vast, untamable. As I stood by the waves, I realized something profound. He was a chapter. But I was the whole story. Every pain, every tear, every night I thought I'd never make it, they had all led me here. To this woman, this peace, this freedom. I took a deep breath, smiled, and whispered to the wind, "Thank you for leaving. Because losing you helped me find myself." The tide washed over my feet, cool and cleansing, and for the first time, I didn't look back. I walked forward, into my own light, my own power, my own life. Because this isn't a story about a man who left. It's about a woman who rose, and I rose, higher than ever before.